Okay. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and I'm going to begin by apologizing for our tardiness, but knowing that there is a group of students in the audience tonight that are here to look at office procedures and the way people get along and behave toward each other, I know we wanted to be prepared for that. And clearly one of the office procedures around here is that our previous meeting always goes late and we start our next meeting late. So my apologies for that. We have a group of students from Douglas College whose their instructor is undoubtedly watching on the webcast, because this is being cast over the web, so you may want to sit over in one of these seats where you'll be visible. They'll know you're here. Yes. Welcome. And good evening, everyone. My name is Mayor Richard Stewart, and on behalf of City Council, I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to a public hearing into the bylaws that will be read to you in a moment by the City Clerk. Council for the City of Coquitlam has given first reading to these bylaws and has directed that a public hearing be held. Staff from the City's Planning and Development Department will first present a summary of each proposed bylaw, and then we'll open the floor to anyone in attendance that wishes to present his or her views on the proposed bylaw before us. We'll do it this way. Those that have pre-registered will be given first opportunity to speak, and then we'll open the floor to others. I stress to all that this is a public hearing. It's an opportunity for anyone who has a view on the proposed bylaw to make that view known to council members. Council members are here with an open mind and are here to listen to your input. No one has prejudged the outcome of these applications, but we have some rules that we find make it go as smoothly as it can go. First of all, this is not a question and answer period. It's not an opportunity to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with either council members, with staff, or with those in attendance who might not agree with you. Sometimes there are people who don't agree in the audience. We ask that everyone please restrict their comments to the proposed bylaw and be as brief and concise as possible. We're asking speakers to respect a 5-minute time limit in order that everyone who wishes to speak is able to do so. Speakers are permitted to speak more than once if they are providing new and good stuff. You just have to get to the back of the line, so we'll allow everyone to speak at least once first. We ask that the audience be respectful of each speaker and allow that speaker to make his or her point without interruption. And to that end, sometimes, very seldom, people become critical of another person or express things that are effectively insults that don't have any place here, don't have any place in the dialogue related to a democracy. This dialogue has to be about public policy and the important decisions that council has to make. And if anybody insults anybody, we ended up losing interest in the perspective that the person doing the insulting is actually presenting. So we ask the audience, and we almost always get complete respect from audience, from each speaker, and from the audience that listens. We ask that everyone refrain from clapping and booing and cheering and jeering and any of the presentations made this evening. As chair of the hearing, I reserve the right to conclude any presentation that doesn't relate to the bylaw, that becomes abusive in any way, or becomes repetitive of views that speaker has already made known to council members. Now, if you've got something written that you want to be part of the public record, you have to hand it in to the clerk's desk prior to adjournment of that item on the public hearing agenda. Once we've adjourned an item on the agenda, City Council is not allowed to receive any new information. It's a rule. We can't receive any more information until we've decided that item, either rejected it or given it fourth reading at some point in the future. Now, immediately following adjournment of the public hearing tonight, we'll have a regular council meeting so that council can consider not only items on the council agenda, but also the items on tonight's public hearing agenda. However, if during the public hearing council requests further information related to an item, consideration of that item can be deferred pending receipt of the requested information. I'll now call on Mr. Gilbert to introduce the bylaws on tonight's agenda and the planning and development staff to make a presentation on the first item.
Thank you, Your Worship. First item this evening is an application to amend City of Coquitlam zoning bylaw number 3000 in order to rezone the properties at 960 and 964 Walls Avenue from RS1 one-family residential to RT1 two-family residential. This is bylaw number 4700.
Good evening, Council and members of the audience. I'm George Fuji, Director of Development Services. The first application, rezoning at 960 and 964 Walls Avenue. The two existing RS1 zone lots located on the south side of Walls Avenue, west of Nelson Creek, between Blue Mountain Street and Lebleu Street. And under the Millardville neighborhood plan, they're designated neighborhood attached residential. And the proposal is to rezone from RS1 to RT1 two-family residential zone for the purpose of creating 4 lots from the 2 existing RS1 lots. Staff recommend, following the public hearing, that Council grant second and third reading to zoning amendment bylaw 4700-2016.
Okay. Item 1, we have 1 speaker registered, and that is Jenny Boulanger at 370 Lebleu. Boulanger.
Hi, my name is Jenny Boulanger, and I am a resident with my husband and 2 kids at 370 Lebleu Street. And just to give a bit of a background on to where we exist, the RT1 rezoning proposal is across the ravine from where we are. So we are 370, which is, I think, 16 on that map. Nelson Creek is the creek that goes between our property and the lane that is along the edge of RT1. And as part of our property, and I think that's most of the owners along this ravine, our property goes from our house, which is on the east side of the ravine, through the ravine. The ravine is part of our property all the way up to that lane, which the RT1 proposal goes to. We do have to give rights to the DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, so that we have to be sort of stewards of the area. So I respectfully share the following questions regarding the applications to change the land use of 960 and 964 Walls. I understand that the rezoning process requires that the applicant submits an application requirement to the Planning and Development Department of Coquitlam before a public hearing such as this. And I'm not sure if this question can be answered right now, but one of the questions I'd like to find the answer to is, does the application requirement include the necessary riparian assessments, riparian meaning the protection of any streams in the area, geotechnical surveys, and approval from the DFO, which are part of the many steps of preparation that you need before you build or develop along any of those areas. And just from past experience, my husband and I wanted to go from our 2-bedroom bungalow to do renovation, and because our teenage children needed a bedroom each. So in 2006, it took us a year of applying through the city and going through all the necessary assessments, riparian, geotechnical surveys, DFO, all those kinds of things, and it took over $10,000 and a lot of time to just actually get the approval to be able to build onto our house. We couldn't get approval to rebuild because if we mowed down our house and started again, the setbacks from the street and the ravine meant that we would have to have a house -1 meter thick. So I guess my question is, are we going through this process of asking for rezoning before we really know whether the builders can build that many, like 4 residences in 2 spaces close to that riparian zone? So that's my first question.
Did you want, why don't we try?
Okay.
Does staff have any comment about, I assume, related to 964? Mr. Fuji.
Excuse me. Through your worship, this particular application is far enough away from Nelson Creek which didn't require environmental review, but is the following item, the property to the north, did require environmental review submitted by a qualified environmental professional.
So
Thank
it's not an issue on this item. Okay.
Thanks. And the second question refers to the wording that taking the two properties that are existing and facilitate the subdivision of them into 4 lots, each with a new single-family dwelling and the potential for a secondary suite. So I guess in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, does the secondary suite refer to only a legal suite within the single-family dwelling, or can it also refer to a living area in a secondary building like a coach house or a laneway house?
Mr. Fuji.
Through the chair, in this particular case, a secondary suite, if the I guess future owners decide to do so, would be contained within the principal dwelling.
So if there are 4 dwellings, that means they could have 4 suites, one inside each dwelling. Thank you. So if that occurs, and there are renters and secondary dwellers in those buildings, so now we have 4 buildings with the potential for 8 different residents, groups of residents. That would mean that, say, if they each had 1 car, that'd be 8 cars instead of now the 2 that each of the residents might have. And the potential is, of course, that each residence might have 2 cars, which means then we need to find parking for either 8 cars, or if each resident has 2, then it's 16 cars. So my concern will be that will there have to be an allowance within the boundaries of their properties to allow for enough parking, because that's a lane that goes along the edge. So essentially Walls Avenue there ends in a dead end, the ravine. It has access to the lane at its termination, which goes back around to Blue Mountain. I feel there may be a temptation for people to park their vehicles along the lane, even though I think it's against bylaw, and especially on the edge bordering the ravine. This would infringe on the west border of the ravine of our property, because our property spans across to that side. And also, it may risk the integrity of the banks of the ravine if people start parking legally or illegally along there. I ask that due consideration be given to the protection of the green space of Nelson Creek.
Mr. Fuji.
Through the chair, there would be required to be 2 parking spaces for the principal single-family dwellings, for each dwelling proposed. And in addition, there will be an on-site 3rd parking space for each for any proposed secondary suite. And as part of the development application, or part of the detailed servicing stuff, the lane, the flanking and rear lanes will be upgraded. And the vehicle access will be off the lane, not off the front. So
vehicle access, meaning access to their parking spots?
That's correct.
Will be off the lane?
That's right.
Okay. So that means that there could potentially be other extras of up to 4. Like if the extra residents, the renters, had 2 vehicles, then there would have to be 4 along the streets.
The applicant is obligated to meet the minimum requirements of the zoning bylaw, which is 2 for each dwelling unit and 1 for a potential secondary suite. Yeah.
Okay, and the bylaws are such that there is no laneway parking allowed in Coquitlam. Is that true? I know it's true in Burnaby. I'm not sure.
That's correct. I don't think there would be even physically room to actually park a car in the lane. So.
Yeah. Okay, those are my 2 points. Thank you.
Lanes are typically 12 feet of pavement, and it doesn't leave enough room to park. And if you did park, you'd get a ticket, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. I have no other registered speakers or any other speakers for this item. I'll step forward. Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Rachel Harrington, and I live at 960 Walls Avenue. So I'm one of the applicants, the one, I guess, westmost property. I just wanted to say a few words to put our development application in context. I grew up in the Tri-Cities, and as did my father, he actually grew up on Stewart Avenue, just below our house. We purchased our house a 1.5 years ago from close family friends, And our intent with the rezoning is to subdivide our property and create 2 single-family homes. We will live in one of the homes and raise our family, and the second home we hope to rent out to another family to help build that sort of family sense of community on the street. It is a dead-end street, and we love living there right now. We have wonderful neighbors across the street, and our kids always play together outside. And we've actually gone in on this application with our neighbors to the east to sort of demonstrate that we're all working closely together. This will be our forever home, and we love how it's close to amenities on Poirier Street, some great parks, and it's close to public transportation. Our household is a 1-car household. My husband and I both cycle to work every day, but we do understand that parking is sometimes a concern, so we obviously will provide the minimum parking stalls required, so 3 parking spaces for each of our lots. So I just wanted to put that out there, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers to this item? Third and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? Mr. Sung, were you just waving to a small child, or were you wanting to speak? Councillor Zarrillo.
I just had a quick question. I think these are back-loaded parking. Is that correct, from the lane through the chair to staff? So we just have one smaller width parking access point at 964, the farthest east one. It's 7.1 meters, obviously not for the whole area being 7.1, but is this going to be a barrier to getting 3 parking spot width at that last development lot on the very east corner of 964?
Through the chair, to Councillor Zarrillo, through the sort of the detailed subdivision design stage, will ensure that that whatever finessing is required is done to ensure that the third surface stall is properly dimensioned and located. In addition to the 2-car garage, which will be provided.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll do one last time. Any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Mr. Sung, any other speakers to this item? Seeing none, I'll declare this item closed.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next item, item 2, is application to amend City of Coquitlam zoning bylaw number 3000 in order to rezone the properties at 961 Walls Avenue and a portion of 374 Lebleu Street from RS1 1-family residential to RT1 2-family residential. This is bylaw number 4716.
So the subject of this particular rezoning application is across the street on the north side of Walls Avenue. It comprises 2 RS1 lots, 961.
Mr. Fuji, you'll have to come closer to the podium.
sorry.
Sorry. Doesn't look like a microphone, but it's somewhere in that podium.
So, as I indicated earlier, this particular subject site is directly to the north, or to the north on the north side of Walls Avenue from item number 1 on the agenda. It consists of 2 RS1 lots, all of 961 Walls Avenue, which is currently vacant, and a small portion, the westerly, my eyes aren't that great, but approximately 29 square meter portion of the property at 374 Lebleu Street. 374 Lebleu Street on the east side of the creek is an existing single-family dwelling, which will be retained as part of the application.
Okay, don't look at the cursor anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Just put the mouse on there. There we go.
So the subject site, similar to the one to the south, is within the Millardville neighborhood plan and designated neighborhood attached residential. And the proposal is to rezone to the RT1 2-family residential zone. And the proposal is to facilitate 2 RT1 lots from the two existing RS1 lots as shown on the proposed subdivision on the screen. And following the public hearing, staff recommends that council grant second, third, and final readings to zoning amendment bylaw number 4716, 2016.
Thank you. And in the same neighborhood again, we have one speaker registered for this one, and that is Jenny Boulanger at 370 Lebleu Street.
Jenny Boulanger, 370 Lebleu. At the risk of being repetitive, I was told I should just talk again about, because it'll be on record. So we are at 370 Lebleu. The ravine separates us from where the development's going to occur. Our direct neighbor is 374 Lebleu because there is, I think, a city or hydro lot in between our lots that separates us. But we actually, the ravine is continuous throughout there. In this particular case, the part of the ravine that belongs to 374 that will be sold or has been sold to the RT1 suggested area has no laneway access, and it will be right, their property borders right on the ravine. So I think Mr. Fuji had mentioned before that it's a slightly different situation. So I'm wondering if the approval process to get to this public hearing for this one included the riparian assessments, the geotechnicals, and the DFO and all the other things that will have to be in place eventually, even if they do build, because if it hasn't been done already, it will have to be built, or it will have to be gone through, and they may discover then that they can't build. So I'm wondering if that's been done.
Now, in fairness, we get to decide land use here. You know, someone else at some point, there's a process to decide what gets built. But Mr. Fuji probably knows something about that by the sound of it. He's about to weigh in on it. Mr. Fuji.
Through the chair to delegation, this particular site, as the Nelson Creek does run along the westerly portion of the Lebleu Street property. As a result, the applicant did submit an environmental report prepared by a qualified environmental professional, and the report has recommended a minimum 10-meter wide streamside protection and enhancement area.
And so that would be during the building process or in the final?
The environmental protection area will be protected through the prior to the building, through the subdivision stage. So prior to any building permit being applied for, all of the protective measures will be put into place as far as the legal documentation and other requirements along those lines.
And as far as the setback from the ravine, the regulations that the city of Coquitlam has, so has that been gone through already, so we know that there's enough room for them and they won't have to have a building that's -1 meter thick?
Through the chair to the delegation, we haven't received the detailed building information from the applicant as of yet, but clearly through the review process, we'll ensure that there's no disturbance to and the appropriate setbacks are provided from the riparian area boundary.
Thank you.
And we're actually quite strict in Coquitlam. We don't allow buildings that are negative thickness.
Yeah. And I do appreciate all the regulations. They're in place for a reason, and I appreciate that. And back to my second question about the parking. Now you're taking one lot and adding a little bit to it and then splitting it down the middle. So now there will be two major houses, and on this case, I'm going to confirm, it won't be a coach house as well as the principal residence, or is it the same as the other ones where it'll be an in-house suite?
Through the chair to the delegation, it'll be similar to the property to the south, that any secondary suite will be contained within the principal dwelling.
Okay, thank you. And then again, now the parking goes from 2, say potentially for the one house that used to be there, to potentially 2 times 2, which is 4. So again, I assume that it'll be garages for the two places within for each residence, plus an extra space on property for the renters. And again, the potential for extra cars is pretty great. So where will it go? Because there is now no extra laneway. Of course, you can't park in it anyways, but there's just that small frontage in front of their one lot that's going to be split into 2. So I guess my question is there enough space for having parking on the street to accommodate potentially 4 residents instead of 1?
And let me, through the chair, there will be sufficient on-site parking again, 2 for the principal residence and 1 for a potential secondary suite. The access to the parking will be again off the rear lane, and any visitor parking would be accommodated on the street.
That's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, are there any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Third and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you. I just have a question for staff about the lane behind 961. I don't see the lane behind 961. So will the lane improvements be part of the subdivision?
Through the chair to Councillor Zerillo, yes, there is a dedicated lane, and as part of this application, the applicant will be required to sort of upgrade and physically construct the lane.
So what I find interesting about this one is we often, when we see dead-end lanes like this, that we see a turnaround that's been cut into the subdivision, and I see that this is a little bit different, that there is an access point to the west, but I don't see a turnaround. If someone ends up at the end of the lane, how? Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's a little bit different because it has this, but usually they have.
Yeah, there does appear on the map on the screen to be a right-of-way for a lane. On the satellite photo, the right-of-way doesn't appear to have been constructed.
Through the chair, yes, there is the right-of-way or the legal right-of-way for the lane does exist, but the lane isn't physically constructed. In terms of the Councillor Zerillo's comment about the dead-end lane, there is no proposal at this point in time to provide any sort of turnaround because of the limited space in there. We would hope that the many folks wouldn't get lost and drive down that lane thinking that it goes through, given that there's a Nelson Creek and it's a substantial environmental corridor to the east there. And I guess the occasional person who may be lost would likely either do a sort of a pull into if the visitor parking space is vacant, pull in and pull out, or failing that may be required if they're lost to just sort of reverse back westward along the lane and pull out, and which daylights onto Walls Avenue.
Okay, I just thought it was part of our policy that there would be a turnaround, because every time I've seen one like this at a dead end, there's always been a cut-in for a turnaround. That's all. I just thought that I thought it was part of our city policies, street policies, lane policies, to have a turnaround.
Or would it be considered in this case that it's not a dead end because it does elbow down to?
It's a very short distance from that turning point. I think Mr. Singh, the engineer, can comment on that.
Yeah, through your worship, yeah, that little portion of the lane that dead ends, it only really serves the 2 properties, one on each side, and it's really a glorified driveway. So if anyone drives down, they'll just have to back out. Really, the only person that uses it is the 2 end houses.
Well, that was my question. I was wondering, with the street access being there, was it a rule? Like, I got to think we have rules that say if it's this distance length of lane, it has to have a turnaround. Like, we don't have that.
I don't know if there's any kind of hard rules, but you just have to be very practical about it. If it's only kind of 2 lots deep, then it's really just acts as a driveway, and having a turnaround at the end of the lane is not really that critical for people to turn
I guess
around.
the reason that I'm concerned about it is because, again, both of these lots narrow to less than 10 meters at the back, and we're going to have basically 6 car widths here, and if they don't have letdowns for their garage, we could end up with 6 cars back there that can't maneuver around, that's all. So as long as staff's comfortable, they can figure it out, but it just doesn't seem, I worry when it's less than 10 meters wide. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Reid.
So, where are the 6 parking spots going to be? On the north end of this property?
Through the chair to Councillor Reid, this particular one, the parking spaces for the house or the proposed homes will in fact be within the houses themselves. So it's not a situation where you're going to have a rear, a detached garage. In fact, it'll be, if you can imagine just a typical single-family front load or a home with a driveways off the front, if you can imagine a scenario where it sort of flip. So the house is going to be designed, specially designed so that there'll be a garage sort of, I guess, at the lower level of the house itself with a much longer sort of, shall we call it, throat from the lane to the homes.
Okay, so stop right there from the lane. Are you talking about at the north where it looks like there's bush? The north end of that lot, not the lane on the side of it.
It'll be from the north lane, from the north, that's correct. However, the proposed lot to the west could conceivably, and again, we don't have the building permit drawings, could conceivably have a driveway taking access from the north-south lane.
Well, I really want to see this one. Because it means that the people developing this are going to have to clear out that little piece of grass, correct? On the north end of this lot in order to have access and egress for 6 cars.
Through the chair, that's correct, Councillor Reid.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One last time, are there any other speakers to this item? Please come forward.
My name is Asana Askarian. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. Just a quick clarification with regards to our intention with regards to parking. So the back lane, the north lane, that's currently owned by the City of Coquitlam, which as part of the application is to be constructed. And then the garages will both be attached at the back. So you will get a full driveway length. So you'll have 2 parking spaces in the garage, as well as another 2 parking spaces behind that for anybody living in the primary residence. And then there will be your secondary suite parking.
We won't, I can confirm we won't be constructing a lane, but Mr. Fuji.
Correct.
As part of the application, the applicant will be required to upgrade and construct a lane.
No, the applicant, that's what I meant. There will be a lane back there when the buildings are built.
Okay. We're all comfortable there. Thank you. Ms. Blanc, one moment. Are there anybody else? Ms. Boulanger, please come forward.
Further to clarify about the parking then, so if the lane is constructed by the applicant and there will be access for the parking of those 2 houses, which will also have potentially 2 suites, if there is not a larger turnaround at the end of that lane, the property closest to the ravine is a little bit trapped in the sense that again, the turning around and all that kind of stuff to get in and out. I would assume that when the person sells those 2 lots, it's not necessarily going to go to the same family, so it may be that neighbors may not be quite so comfortable with having such close quarters and problems with parking at the back. So I'm just thinking, you know, community-wise, for good neighbors, I'm not sure that it's very clear that there's going to be a lot of easy access to those houses for both of the sets of families or whoever are going to live there. And I just think that's something that should be considered a bit for just the feel of the community, that people feel that they all have a smooth access to their properties and there's not going to be friction in the future.
Thank you. Now, are there any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Third and final time, any other speakers to this item? Seeing none, I'll declare this item and the public hearing closed. It'll take us a few minutes to rejig some tapes and things, and we'll convene as soon as we're ready. Okay, we'll get going just as soon as our council members have retaken their seats. No, it's not like staff to be fast, but as always, Mr. Gilbert, you're brilliant. Okay. I will call a meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. I want to begin by making reference to United Nations Day. There's at least a couple of us who have done work at the UN level. Today, October 24th, the anniversary of the Charter of the United Nations was dedicated in 1948 to be devoted to making known to the peoples of the world the aims and achievements of the United Nations and gaining support for its work. It does tremendous work in a wide range of fields, from refugees through humanitarian services. And today, in fact, is United Nations Day. I looked for my United Nations tie, but I couldn't find it. But I'm heartbroken, I am. Mr. Clerk.
Shall I save you? Item 1 is minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, October 17th. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is meeting notes of the Coquitlam River Watershed Roundtable Core Committee meeting held on Wednesday, June 22nd. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Zarrillo. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is minutes of the Sustainability and Environmental Advisory Committee meeting held on Tuesday, September 20th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, the chair, seconded by Councillor Marsden. Oh, it was Wilson. Sounded a lot like Marsden. Okay. Councillor Wilson, who's the vice chair, all in favor? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is meeting notes of the Coquitlam River Watershed Roundtable Core Committee meeting held on Wednesday, September 21st. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Zarrillo. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 5 is minutes of the Meardville Commercial and Cultural Revitalization Advisory Committee meeting held on Thursday, October 6th. Recommendation to receive.
Moved by Councillor Wilson, the chair, second by Councillor Hodge, the vice chair. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns Société Francophone de Meilleur feasibility study. This is an OB item from that committee's meeting, and the committee's recommendation is that council study the potential of a Francophone cultural centre in Meilleur to be adjacent to the proposed new Place Meilleur or other visible location in the Meilleur neighbourhood.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Zarrillo to study the issue. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
Second item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns the committee review discussion. And the committee recommendation is that council reconsider its decision to discontinue the Meilleur Commercial and Cultural Revitalization Advisory Committee at the end of 2016, and that the committee continue to meet on an annual or as required basis.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Asmundson to receive. No discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 pertains to the minutes of the council and committee meeting held on Monday, October 17th. These minutes were approved earlier this afternoon. However, the committee had an item of business, and that is that the city support Councillor Zarrillo's participation on standing committees of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the costs associated thereof.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Hodge. That would be the past and future expenses related to those committees. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. With our thanks.
Item 7 is the first item from this evening's public hearing. It pertains to zoning amendment bylaw number 4700, and the addresses are 960 and 964 Walls Avenue. Staff recommendation is that council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4700.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Towner. Councillor Zarrillo.
So just one comment about the parking. I'm sorry to have to say it, but please make sure that these are usable parking spots. I've seen some around in the Millardville area where the third parking spot is actually not. You can pull into it maybe, but you can't get the doors open. So if we could just make sure that these are usable spots so that the cars don't flow out onto the street. Thank you very much.
Just picturing someone climbing out of the car window just like something out of a television show in the 70s. Magnum P.I., you think it was. And I was thinking Dukes of Hazzard. Okay, any other comments? Any other questions? The question is second and third reading, all in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.
Next item, item 8, pertains to zoning amendment bylaw number 4716 and 961 Walls Avenue and a portion of Lebleu Street. Not Lebleu Street, but the property next door fronting Lebleu. Staff recommendations that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4716.
Moved by Councillor Towner, second by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Zerillo.
Comments here, especially since the widths at the back are even narrower, and I think there are some restrictions for distance from the creek, and so we may be in a position where the garage will have to be in a different position too. So I'm just asking that these parking spots are usable so cars don't flow out onto the street. Thank you.
Actually, I have a question along those lines. Is it possible to access parking, some of the parking spaces at least, from the north-south lane? You did mention that? Yeah. I'm trying to remember what was said about that.
Yeah, through your worship, there is potential to possibly look at that for the proposed lot on the westerly side. There is a potential to look at access to the garages off the north-south lane versus the east-west lane. So, yes.
Okay, so that could allow squeezing a little bit of space and perhaps address the last concern that was voiced. Okay, the question is second, third, and fourth and final reading. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 9 is first report of staff. It concerns zoning text amendment bylaw number 4714 and the C6 casino commercial zone at 2080 United Boulevard. Staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning text amendment bylaw number 4714. The bylaw number 4714 be referred to public hearing, and that the following items be required prior to consideration of fourth and final reading to bylaw number 4714. And this is A, issuance of an amended development permit, and B, Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure approval of bylaw number 4714.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, second by Councillor Towner. Are we perhaps rushing this hotel thing a bit? Okay, any discussion related to first reading and a public hearing? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10 pertains to final reading to zoning text amendment bylaw number 4698 and the development permit authorization for an industrial building at 14 King Edward Street, formerly 2 King Edward Street. Staff recommendation is that council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning text amendment bylaw number 4698. 2, authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement amending those portions of the development agreement between Fraser Mills Properties and the city, dated for reference November 3rd, 2008, discussed in the report before you. And 3, approve the signing and sealing of the development permit for 14 King Edward Street, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute this permit on behalf of the city.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Councillor Wilson.
In the report, it talks about the unused density being transferred to Lot 7A. And I'm trying to remember correctly when we talked about this, there wasn't a clear understanding of how that unused density might be used. Has there been any kind of discussion or any clearer identification of how that might be used?
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, as council will recall, the the applicant or the owner, BD Development, is currently putting together a package of proposed changes to the zoning, development permit, development agreement for the site. And through that exercise, they will, I believe, come back to council, and they will come back to council and illustrate how they propose to reallocate the unused density.
So we're considering this without knowing, I guess that's the bottom line.
The current text rezoning proposal is essentially to allow for the applicant to be able to get their development permit and build a purpose-built building for AG Hair on Lot 1A, and the sort of the unused density is been moved to Lot 7A, which essentially is a parking lot currently for the unused density, and the applicant will, as I said earlier, will need to sort of demonstrate to council how they propose to utilize that unused density through the on Lot 7A and or the balance of the industrial properties through the subsequent applications, which are need to be submitted by December 1st to SAF.
Okay. I also had a question about the variance of 1.5 meters, I believe it is, on the western side of the building. And it says here that they need that in order to accommodate the process flow and equipment orientation. So it's a 60,000 square foot building. Seems like 1.5 meters. Could have probably figured out how to make that work. Have we given 1.5 meter variances to the buildings to the south of it as well? I can't remember.
Through the chair to Councillor Wilson, no, the buildings to the south do comply with the setback requirements of the zone.
Okay. Thank you.
Nobody else? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, before we do that, I've got a couple of announcements I'd like to make. One of them relates, well, both of them relate to outstanding Coquitlam students that have been honored recently, and we'll start with Kelvin. Kelvin Zhang, he's a Glen Eagle student who just won the Canada-wide Science Fair, a gold medal and $5,000 in awards, by using coding to create an algorithm that works like a human brain. The algorithm controls a virtual car, and the car can, without ever knowing how to drive, without never having driven or being programmed to drive, can learn how to drive. And he has demonstrated this algorithm, and I suspect he's on his way to someplace spectacular, working on a tech field for self-driving vehicles or some similar thing. So we want to congratulate Kelvin. And this one here, this is April Reese, Coquitlam student, grade 10 at Pine Tree Secondary, who's representing Coquitlam tomorrow. She's an Ice Age Art Contest winner. She's representing Coquitlam tomorrow as a BC Royal Museum Youth Ambassador in Victoria. And so I should have sent her with the chain of office or something so that I could appear smart. But anyway, so that's April Reese from Coquitlam and Kelvin Zhang from Coquitlam, both students right here at Pine Tree Secondary and Glen Eagle Secondary. Congratulations on behalf of council to them. Did someone else have something? No? Okay. The motion to adjourn was by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Hodge. No. Oh, Councillor O'Neill. Hodge wants to stay. Motion is to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? And we are completely unanimous on all items tonight. I will now open the floor to a public question period. Questions on tonight's agenda? Any items on tonight's agenda that people have questions on? Questions on any items of tonight's agenda? Seeing none, thank you all for coming. Happy UN Day.